Victoria Hale signed the final divorce document on a rainy Thursday afternoon and felt nothing at first. The lawyer across from her smiled politely, slid the papers into a folder, and congratulated her on completing the process, but his voice sounded distant, as if it were coming through a wall. 3 years. 3 years of being married to Sébastien Laurent, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, and now it was over. The contract marriage that had begun as a cold arrangement had officially ended exactly as it was supposed to. She walked out of the building carrying only a small handbag and an umbrella, leaving behind a life most people would have fought desperately to keep. The city traffic hummed beneath grey skies while raindrops tapped softly against her umbrella. For the first time in years, nobody was waiting to tell her where to be, what charity gala to attend, or which family dinner required her presence. Freedom should have felt exciting. Instead, it felt strangely quiet. Across town, Sébastien Laurent stared at the empty side of his dining table. A half-finished cup of coffee sat where Victoria's seat had always been. For 3 years they had shared a house large enough to hold 20 people, yet now the silence seemed impossibly loud. He told himself it didn't matter. The marriage had been a business agreement. He had needed a wife to secure a corporate merger. Victoria had needed money to save her father's failing company. They had signed papers, followed rules, attended events, and maintained appearances. Feelings had never been part of the arrangement. Yet as he reached for his coffee, his eyes drifted toward the small vase of white roses on the table. Victoria replaced those flowers every Monday. Nobody else in the house ever remembered. He looked away immediately, irritated by the thought. Meanwhile, Victoria moved into a modest apartment on the opposite side of the city. It wasn't luxurious. The kitchen was small, the elevator occasionally stopped working, and the water pressure was inconsistent. She loved it. She spent her first night sitting cross-legged on the floor eating takeout noodles while watching old movies. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody called her to attend another meaningless social event. She laughed at scenes she found funny and cried at scenes she found sad without worrying about appearances. Days turned into weeks. Victoria found work helping manage a small arts foundation. The salary wasn't impressive, but the work mattered. She met artists, teachers, and volunteers whose lives had nothing to do with billion-dollar acquisitions. She began smiling more often. Sébastien noticed the changes from a distance. Not because he was following her. At least that's what he claimed. Mutual acquaintances mentioned her name occasionally. Someone showed photos from a charity event. Victoria appeared genuinely happy. The realization bothered him more than it should have. One evening, nearly 4 months after the divorce, Sébastien attended a corporate banquet. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and expensive jewelry. Halfway through the evening, he spotted Victoria standing near a sculpture display, wearing a dark green dress. She was speaking animatedly with a group of guests, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. He couldn't remember the last time she'd looked that alive while married to him. A strange feeling tightened in his chest. He crossed the room without thinking. Victoria. She turned. For a brief second surprise flashed across her face before settling into calm politeness. Sébastien. You look well. I am well. The simplicity of her answer unsettled him. There was no bitterness. No sadness. No longing. Just honesty. I heard your foundation project received additional funding. It did. Congratulations. Thank you. The conversation died. During their marriage, silence had often stretched between them, but this felt different. Final. Victoria smiled politely. Enjoy your evening, Sébastien. Then she walked away. Sébastien watched her disappear into the crowd and experienced something he had not felt in years. Regret. It struck him suddenly and without mercy. Not because the marriage had ended. Because he had wasted it. Over the following weeks, the feeling grew stronger. Small memories returned unexpectedly. Victoria waiting for him after late meetings with dinner she knew he liked. Victoria sitting beside his hospital bed after a car accident years earlier. Victoria remembering every birthday of every employee in his company. Victoria laughing during a rare vacation when a seagull stole his sandwich. He remembered hundreds of moments he had ignored because he assumed she would always be there. Then came the night everything changed. Victoria left the foundation office later than usual after preparing an upcoming exhibition. The streets were quiet. Most businesses had closed. She noticed a black sedan parked across the road but thought little of it. As she approached her apartment building, footsteps echoed behind her. Fast footsteps. She turned. A man in a dark jacket rushed toward her. Instinct screamed danger. Victoria ran. The stranger shouted something she couldn't hear. Her pulse exploded. She sprinted toward the apartment entrance, fumbling for her keys. The man grabbed her arm. She screamed. Suddenly another figure appeared. A delivery motorcycle skidded between them. The rider jumped off and tackled the attacker. Both men crashed onto the pavement. Victoria stumbled backward in shock. The attacker recovered first and fled into the darkness. The motorcyclist removed his helmet. Sebastian stared at her. Rainwater dripped from his hair. Victoria couldn't even speak. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Sebastian hesitated. "I was nearby. You were following me." "Not tonight." The answer sounded suspiciously specific. Before Victoria could press further, police sirens echoed from nearby streets. Sebastian looked toward the sound. His expression hardened. This wasn't random. What? That man wasn't trying to rob you. Victoria felt cold despite the warm night air. "How do you know?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Because I recognized him." The next morning, Sebastian arrived at Victoria's apartment with a private security team. Victoria nearly slammed the door in his face. "Absolutely not. Someone tried to abduct you. I can handle myself." "No, Victoria. You can't." His tone carried an edge she hadn't heard in years. Not arrogance. Fear. Real fear. "Talk to me," she demanded. Sebastian remained silent for several seconds before speaking. 6 months ago I acquired a shipping company. During the process, I unknowingly disrupted operations belonging to a criminal organization. Victoria stared at him. Criminal organization? They lost hundreds of millions. And now they're targeting me. Because you're my former wife. The words landed heavily between them. Victoria looked away. "We're divorced." Criminals don't care. Over the following days, evidence emerged confirming Sebastian's fears. Anonymous threats appeared. Victoria's apartment was broken into while she was away. Security footage showed masked intruders searching the property. Nothing was stolen. They were sending a message. Reluctantly, Victoria agreed to temporary protection. Sebastian moved her into a secure estate outside the city. The arrangement reignited old tensions almost immediately. "You still think you can order people around," Victoria snapped during breakfast one morning. "And you still refuse help when you need it." "I needed emotional support for 3 years. Where were you then?" Sebastian froze. The accusation struck harder than she intended. Victoria immediately regretted saying it. Yet Sebastian didn't argue. He lowered his eyes. "You deserved better." The admission surprised her more than any defense could have. Days passed. The threat outside the estate continued growing while something equally complicated developed inside it. Victoria witnessed sides of Sebastian she had never seen before. He slept only a few hours each night while coordinating security measures. He personally reviewed surveillance reports. He accompanied her whenever she left the property. One afternoon she caught him standing outside the greenhouse where she spent time reading. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Watching." "Why?" Sebastian looked embarrassed. "Because if something happened to you, I'd never forgive myself." Victoria expected the answer to annoy her. Instead it left her strangely unsettled. Several nights later, armed men breached the estate perimeter. Alarms erupted across the property. Security teams engaged the intruders while Victoria and Sebastian were escorted toward a panic room. Gunfire echoed through the darkness. Victoria's heart pounded violently. Halfway to safety, an explosion shattered nearby windows. The blast knocked everyone off balance. Smoke filled the hallway. One of the attackers emerged through the chaos carrying a rifle. Sebastian reacted instantly. He shoved Victoria behind him. The gunman fired. The bullet struck Sebastian's shoulder. Victoria screamed. Security guards returned fire. The attacker fell. For several terrifying minutes, confusion consumed everything. Eventually authorities secured the estate. Ambulances arrived. Victoria sat beside Sebastian in the emergency room while doctors treated his injury. Blood stained his shirt. Despite obvious pain, he kept asking if she was unharmed. Finally Victoria grabbed his hand. "Stop asking about me." Sebastian blinked. "Are you okay? You got shot. I've had worse. You're impossible." A weak smile appeared. "You used to say that often." Victoria laughed despite herself. Then unexpectedly, tears followed. Sebastian's expression changed instantly. He squeezed her hand gently. Neither spoke for a long time. Outside the hospital window, dawn began painting the horizon gold. For the first time since their divorce, the distance between them no longer felt impossible. Yet neither realized that the attack on the estate was only the beginning. Hundreds of miles away, a powerful figure known only as Valin reviewed photographs spread across a table. One image showed Victoria entering the hospital. Another showed Sebastian beside her. Valin smiled coldly. "Interesting," he murmured. The ex-husband finally discovered he loves her. He tapped Victoria's photograph. "That makes her even more useful." Then he stood and issued a simple order that would soon change both their lives forever. "Bring her to me." Valin's order moved through hidden networks with frightening speed. By sunset, encrypted messages had crossed borders, bank accounts had quietly changed hands, and professional hunters had accepted contracts worth fortunes. None of them knew Victoria personally. To them she was merely a target attached to a payment large enough to buy houses, yachts, and new identities. Meanwhile, Victoria sat beside Sebastian's hospital bed reading a novel she had barely touched for an hour. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Sebastian was asleep, his injured shoulder heavily bandaged. For years she had imagined what she would say if he ever admitted he had failed her, if he ever showed genuine regret. Now that those moments had arrived, she found herself unexpectedly conflicted. The resentment she had carried after the divorce had not vanished, but it no longer felt as sharp as before. She watched him sleeping and remembered the version of Sebastian few people ever saw. The man who secretly funded scholarships without attaching his name. The man who once spent an entire night searching for a lost child during a charity event. The man who had stood in front of a gun without hesitation. A nurse entered quietly. "You should get some rest too." Victoria smiled faintly. "I'll leave soon." The nurse glanced toward Sebastian. "He's lucky." Victoria looked confused. "For surviving?" "No. For having someone wait beside him." The nurse left before Victoria could respond. Several hours later, she finally returned to the secure residence under police escort. She expected exhaustion to pull her into sleep immediately, but instead she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts drifted backward through 3 years of marriage. Not the painful memories. The ordinary ones. Shared breakfasts. Long drives. Small jokes. Comfortable silences. Somewhere along the way she had stopped seeing Sebastian as a husband and started seeing him as a wall she could never climb. Yet now cracks had appeared in that wall, revealing someone unexpectedly vulnerable behind it. Before she could explore the thought further, her phone vibrated. A message appeared from an unknown number. It contained only a photograph. Victoria opened it. Her blood turned cold. The image showed her apartment building taken earlier that day. Another message arrived immediately afterward. "Run." Approached. Even now she recognized them instantly. Sebastian settled beside her. Older. Gray-haired. Still carrying the same steady presence that had become one of the foundations of her life. Thinking again, he asked. Victoria smiled. Always. They sat together in comfortable silence. The kind that only comes after years of shared experience. Nearby, Students practiced music. Children laughed in the distance. Life continued all around them. Finally Sebastian spoke. Do you regret anything? Victoria considered the question carefully. There were mistakes. Painful chapters. Things she wished had happened differently. Yet without those experiences, she wouldn't be sitting here now. She wouldn't have built this life. This family. This purpose. No, she said eventually. You. Sebastian looked across the lake. Then toward her. Only the years I spent pretending I didn't love you. Victoria smiled softly. You made up for them. Sebastian nodded. I tried. Sunset painted the water gold. The world moved gently around them. Not dramatic. Not extraordinary. Just beautiful in the way real life often becomes when viewed with gratitude. And as evening settled across the lake and the lights of campuses, communities, and dreams they had helped build began glowing in the distance, Victoria realized something she had never fully understood before. The greatest love stories aren't the ones where two people save each other. They're the ones where two people help each other become themselves. And that, more than anything else, was why their story endured. Not because it was perfect. Because it was real. And sometimes, real is even better than happily ever after. Many years later, after most people would have assumed there were no chapters left to write, Victoria discovered that life had one final habit she would never fully understand. Every time she believed she had learned all its lessons, it quietly introduced another one. The realization arrived on an ordinary autumn morning when a young woman named Lily arrived at Horizon carrying a worn backpack and a folder thick with sketches. She couldn't have been older than 19. She appeared nervous, determined, and completely exhausted. Victoria happened to be walking through one of the creative centers when she noticed the girl sitting alone outside an office long after everyone else had left. Are you waiting for someone? Victoria asked gently. Lily looked up in surprise. I'm waiting for an answer. About what? The young woman hesitated before handing over the folder. Inside were architectural designs, community development concepts, educational program outlines, and detailed plans for revitalizing struggling rural regions. Victoria turned page after page. The work wasn't perfect. Some ideas were impractical. Others were remarkably brilliant. Who helped you with this? Victoria asked. Lily shook her head. Nobody. The answer immediately reminded Victoria of someone. Years ago she had carried dreams nobody expected to succeed. Years ago she had sat in rooms feeling invisible. She closed the folder carefully. Come with me. That single conversation changed more lives than either of them could have imagined. Over the next several years, Lily became one of Horizon's most ambitious leaders. She challenged assumptions, proposed impossible ideas, made mistakes, learned from them. Eventually she launched programs reaching communities nobody else had figured out how to help. Watching the transformation unfold, Victoria began noticing something fascinating. A new generation was emerging. Not people who wanted to inherit what had been built. People who wanted to build even more. One evening she discussed the observation with Sebastian while they sat on the porch of their lakeside home. The house was quiet. The world felt peaceful. They're better than we were, Victoria said. Sebastian looked up from the book he was reading. The students. The leaders. She smiled. All of them. Sebastian considered it. Good. Victoria laughed softly. That's not the response most founders give. Then most founders are foolish. He closed his book. The goal was never creating followers. His eyes drifted toward lights shining across the distant community. The goal was creating people who wouldn't need us. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Even after all these years, he still found ways to surprise her. Time continued moving. Seasons changed. Buildings expanded. New families arrived. New children grew into adults. Horizon evolved into something so large and interconnected that neither Victoria nor Sebastian could fully comprehend its impact anymore. Reports arrived from countries they had never visited. Former students became ministers, artists, entrepreneurs, scientists, teachers, and community organizers. Every success story seemed connected to another one. Every life touched another life. The ripple effects stretched outward beyond sight. Then, one winter afternoon, Marcus announced his retirement. Nobody believed him. "You're incapable of retirement," Elena informed him. They were attending a gathering at the original campus when Marcus made the declaration. "I can absolutely retire. You started 3 projects this morning. That's unrelated. You called 6 people before breakfast. Networking." Elena shook her head. "You're impossible." Marcus pointed triumphantly. "See? That's exactly why I need retirement." Yet several months later he actually followed through. At least partially. He purchased a small property near the coast and claimed he intended to spend his remaining years fishing, reading, and avoiding responsibility. Everyone gave him approximately 3 weeks. They were correct. Less than a month later he launched a mentorship initiative for young entrepreneurs. Victoria received the announcement while drinking coffee and immediately laughed so hard she nearly spilled it. Some people never truly changed. And perhaps they weren't supposed to. Elena's journey evolved differently. Over time she became one of the most respected advocates for rehabilitation and prevention programs in regions previously influenced by organized crime. She spoke openly about mistakes, accountability, and the dangers of allowing pain to define identity. Many people remained skeptical at first. Some never fully trusted her. Elena accepted that reality without complaint. She understood trust better than most. She knew it couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned repeatedly. One spring afternoon she visited Victoria beside the lake. They sat together watching sailboats move across the water. "Do you ever think about him?" Elena asked unexpectedly. Victoria knew exactly who she meant. "Valin." "Sometimes." Elena nodded. "Me too." Silence settled between them. Finally Elena smiled faintly. He would have hated all of this. She gestured toward the thriving communities surrounding them. Children played nearby. Families filled public spaces. Music drifted through the air. Victoria smiled. That's probably true. For the first time, neither felt sadness discussing him. Some ghosts eventually lost their power. As the decades passed, Victoria and Sebastian gradually stepped back from daily operations. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Responsibility shifted naturally toward younger leaders who had spent years preparing for it. The transition felt less like surrendering control and more like watching a tree continue growing after planting it long ago. One evening, after attending a leadership ceremony, Victoria and Sebastian walked through the original campus together. The grounds were quieter now. Most students had gone home. Lanterns illuminated pathways winding through gardens. "Remember when this was one building?" Victoria asked. Sebastian laughed. "Barely. Remember when we thought 50 students was ambitious? I remember thinking you were ambitious." Victoria smiled. "You weren't wrong." They reached the lakeside bench where so many important conversations had occurred over the years. Without discussing it, both sat down. The water reflected moonlight. A cool breeze moved across the lake. "You know, Victoria," said after a while, "I used to be afraid of endings." Sebastian looked at her. "I know. Now I think endings are just places where people stop paying attention." Sebastian considered the thought. "Explain." Victoria watched the moonlit water. "Every ending we've experienced became something else." She smiled softly. The divorce became a second chance. The second chance became a life. The life became this. She gestured toward everything surrounding them. Sebastian followed her gaze. Communities. Schools. Families. Futures. Dreams. Entire generations influenced by choices made long ago. "Maybe stories never actually end," Victoria said quietly. Sebastian slipped his hand into hers. "I like that theory." They sat together for a long time afterward. No urgency. No unfinished arguments. No fears waiting around the corner. Just gratitude. And as the night deepened around them and lights continued glowing across the communities they had helped create, Victoria realized there was one final lesson life had been teaching all along. Love was never the reward waiting at the end of the journey. Love was the thing that made the journey worth taking in the first place. And somewhere beyond the lake, beyond the campuses and towns and countless lives that had grown from a single unexpected contract marriage, the future continued unfolding, carried forward by people who had never known the whole story, yet were living proof that it had mattered. The story went on, as all meaningful stories do, not because it refused to end, but because its impact continued long after the final page should have been turned. She sat upright. Seconds later the lights inside the residence abruptly shut off. Every room plunged into darkness. Alarms screamed through the estate. Victoria jumped from bed. Voices echoed from downstairs. Footsteps thundered across hallways. Then gunfire erupted outside. The attack had begun. She grabbed a flashlight and opened her bedroom door. A security guard appeared instantly. "We need to move now." They hurried through emergency corridors designed specifically for situations like this. Victoria's pulse hammered in her ears. More gunshots echoed behind them. Someone shouted. Glass shattered. As they approached an underground exit, the guard suddenly stopped. His expression changed. Victoria noticed too late. He turned his weapon toward her. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Nothing personal." Victoria froze. Betrayal hit harder than fear. Before the man could fire, another shot rang out. The guard collapsed. Sebastian emerged from the shadows holding a pistol. His hospital bandage was visible beneath a dark jacket. Victoria stared in disbelief. "You left the hospital?" "Later," he said. "Move." They sprinted through underground tunnels beneath the estate while chaos exploded above them. Sebastian led her toward a hidden vehicle waiting inside an abandoned maintenance garage. As soon as they climbed inside, he accelerated onto a remote mountain road. Victoria looked back through the rear window. Flames illuminated the night sky behind them. "How did they find us?" she asked. Sebastian's expression darkened. "Someone inside my organization is helping them." "How many people can you trust?" Sebastian considered the question. "At the moment." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Maybe 3. The answer frightened her more than the gunfire. By dawn they arrived at a remote coastal village several hours away. Fishing boats bobbed gently in the harbor. The salty air carried scents of seaweed and fresh bread from nearby bakeries. The peaceful setting felt surreal after the violence of the previous night. Sebastian parked outside a weathered guesthouse overlooking the ocean. An elderly woman stepped outside. The moment she saw Sebastian, her stern face softened. "You're injured again." Victoria blinked. "Again?" The woman folded her arms. "When he was 12, he jumped off a cliff trying to impress friends." Sebastian sighed. "Please don't start." His arm was broken in 3 places. Victoria couldn't help laughing. The old woman smiled knowingly. "Good. Someone should laugh at him." For the first time in years, Victoria saw Sebastian genuinely embarrassed. The discovery was strangely delightful. They spent several days hiding in the village while trusted allies investigated the security breach. During that time, life slowed unexpectedly. Sebastian couldn't engage in corporate warfare from dawn until midnight because communication remained limited. Victoria couldn't bury herself in work. They found themselves sharing ordinary moments neither had experienced in years. They walked along beaches at sunset. They ate seafood at small restaurants. They argued about trivial things. One afternoon they rented bicycles. Sebastian crashed into a fence less than 10 minutes later. Victoria laughed so hard she nearly fell off her own bike. "You have terrible balance." The fence moved. "The fence has been there longer than both of us." Even Sebastian laughed at that. Later that evening they sat on a rocky shoreline watching waves crash against distant cliffs. The sky blazed orange and purple. For several minutes neither spoke. Then Sebastian broke the silence. "Why did you really leave?" Victoria looked toward the horizon. "You know why. Tell me anyway." She took a slow breath. "Because I became lonely while living beside someone every day." Sebastian remained silent. Victoria continued. "I stopped expecting affection. Then I stopped expecting attention. Eventually I stopped expecting anything at all. The honesty hurt. She could hear it in her own voice. The worst part wasn't that you didn't love me. Her eyes glistened. It was believing I wasn't worth loving. Sebastian closed his eyes. Every word landed like a blow. I never thought that. You never said anything either. The waves crashed below them. Finally Sebastian spoke. When I was younger, my father taught me something terrible. Victoria turned toward him. What? He said caring about people makes you weak. He spent his entire life proving it. Sebastian stared at the ocean. I believed him. His voice grew quieter. Then I met you. Victoria listened without interrupting. You made me want things I didn't understand. He laughed bitterly. So I ignored them. Because that felt safer. And now? Sebastian looked directly at her. No walls. No masks. No carefully controlled expressions. Now I know I was an idiot. Victoria couldn't suppress a smile. That's not exactly romantic. It's honest. That's new. I'm trying. They sat together as darkness slowly settled over the sea. Neither mentioned love. Yet something meaningful passed between them nonetheless. The next morning their temporary peace shattered. One of Sebastian's trusted allies arrived by boat carrying urgent news. The traitor had been identified. His name was Adrian Cross, a senior executive who had worked beside Sebastian for nearly a decade. Worse still, Adrian wasn't merely feeding information to Valin. He was Valin's son. The revelation changed everything. Sebastian studied the intelligence reports while Victoria listened. Adrian had spent years infiltrating Sebastian's company, patiently positioning himself close to critical operations. Every business conflict, every suspicious leak, every failed negotiation suddenly made sense. Why target you? Victoria asked. Sebastian answered grimly. Because I unknowingly destroyed part of Valin's criminal empire. The ally nodded. Valin wants revenge. But more importantly, he wants leverage. Victoria felt a terrible realization forming. Me. Nobody answered because nobody needed to. That afternoon, Sebastian made a decision. We're ending this. His ally frowned. Ending what? Running. He folded the reports. If Valin wants a war, he'll get one. Victoria immediately recognized the dangerous look in his eyes. She had seen it years ago during hostile corporate takeovers. The difference now was that this conflict involved bullets instead of contracts. Sebastian. No. Listen to me. I've listened to everyone else for years. His voice hardened. This ends now. Victoria followed him outside onto the harbor docks. Fishing boats rocked gently beneath bright sunlight. The peaceful setting contrasted sharply with the anger radiating from him. You can't fight this alone. Sebastian turned. Watch me. There it is. What? The man who thinks carrying every burden himself is strength. Sebastian opened his mouth to argue. Victoria stepped closer. If you keep doing that, you'll lose again. The words stopped him. For a long moment neither moved. Finally Sebastian exhaled slowly. I don't know how to do this differently. Victoria's expression softened. Then learn. Before he could respond, a deafening explosion tore through the harbor. Fire erupted from a warehouse less than 200 yards away. Shockwaves rattled windows throughout the village. People screamed. Birds scattered into the sky. Sebastian immediately pulled Victoria behind a concrete barrier. Another explosion followed. Then gunfire erupted from rooftops overlooking the waterfront. This wasn't a random attack. Valin had found them. And this time he hadn't come with a handful of hired men. He had brought an army. As armed figures emerged from multiple directions and terrified villagers scrambled for cover, Sebastian drew his weapon and looked toward the burning harbor. His eyes turned cold with determination. Beside him, Victoria realized their brief refuge was over. The war had finally arrived at their doorstep, and the next few hours would determine far more than whether they survived. They would decide whether the future Sebastian hoped to build with Victoria would exist at all. The first Bullets shattered fishing nets hanging between wooden posts. Villagers ran in every direction, overturning market stalls and abandoning baskets of fresh catch as panic spread across the harbor. Thick black smoke climbed into the sky from the burning warehouse while flames reflected across the water like liquid fire. Sebastian immediately assessed the battlefield with the speed of someone accustomed to crisis. The attackers had divided into coordinated groups. One team controlled the main road leading out of the village. Another occupied rooftops overlooking the harbor. A third was advancing directly toward the docks. This wasn't intimidation. It was a capture operation. They intended to leave with Victoria. "Stay behind me," Sebastian ordered. Victoria crouched beside the concrete barrier. "You know I hate that sentence." "Good. Hate it later." A pickup truck suddenly accelerated through the chaos. Sebastian recognized the driver instantly. It was Marcus Vance, one of the 3 people he still trusted. Marcus skidded to a stop beside them. "Get in," he shouted. Gunfire erupted around the vehicle. Sebastian pulled Victoria toward the truck. They climbed into the back moments before Marcus accelerated away from the harbor. Bullets struck the metal sides. One shattered the rear window. Victoria ducked as glass sprayed across the seats. The truck bounced violently along narrow coastal roads while attackers pursued them in 2 black SUVs. Marcus glanced into the mirror. "Any ideas?" Sebastian looked behind them. "A few. Hopefully better than your last few." "My last few worked. You got shot." "Minor detail." Even under fire, Victoria found herself rolling her eyes. Some things apparently never changed. The chase intensified as they entered winding roads carved into steep cliffs above the ocean. One pursuing SUV accelerated alongside them. Armed men leaned from windows. Sebastian opened the passenger door, balanced against the frame, and returned fire. The vehicle swerved. Tires screamed. Moments later the SUV struck a guardrail and flipped over the cliff edge. Victoria's stomach lurched as the wreck disappeared into crashing waves below. The second SUV remained relentless. Marcus accelerated harder. The road curved sharply ahead. Without warning, a cargo truck emerged around the bend. Marcus cursed and jerked the wheel. Their pickup narrowly missed a collision but slammed into loose gravel. The vehicle spun sideways. Everything became chaos. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded. Victoria felt herself thrown violently across the seat. The world flipped once, twice, then stopped. Silence followed. For several seconds nobody moved. Victoria blinked. Blood trickled from a small cut near her forehead. Nearby, Marcus groaned. Sebastian was already moving despite his injured shoulder. "Victoria." His voice sounded distant. "Victoria, answer me." "I'm here." Relief flooded his face. The pursuing SUV stopped farther up the road. Doors opened. More gunmen emerged. Sebastian immediately pulled Victoria from the wreckage. "Can you run?" "Yes." "Good." They escaped down a narrow trail descending toward the coastline while Marcus provided covering fire from behind. Gunshots echoed across the cliffs. Rocks splintered around them. The trail eventually led into a network of sea caves carved by centuries of crashing waves. Darkness swallowed them as they moved deeper underground. Water dripped from stone ceilings. Their footsteps echoed through winding passages. Eventually the sounds of pursuit faded. They found temporary shelter inside a cavern overlooking a hidden stretch of beach. Victoria leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Sebastian inspected her injuries. "You're lucky. I've heard that several times recently." He brushed dirt from her sleeve. "I mean it." She noticed his hand trembling slightly. Not from pain. From fear. He had nearly lost her again. Neither spoke about it. Hours passed while they waited. Sunlight gradually shifted across the cave entrance. Sebastian remained alert, watching the shoreline. Victoria sat quietly. Nearby. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving exhaustion behind. Eventually she broke the silence. "When this is over, what happens?" Sebastian didn't answer immediately. "What do you mean?" The danger ends. Valen disappears. Everyone goes home. She looked at him carefully. Then what? The question lingered between them. Sebastian stared toward the ocean. I don't know. Victoria nodded slowly. At least that's honest. He laughed softly. I'm trying to make honesty a habit. She smiled faintly. Then her expression became serious. You know something? What? When we got married, I kept waiting for you to become the man sitting beside me right now. Sebastian looked surprised. Victoria continued. Not the billionaire. Not the businessman. This version. Her voice softened. The one who actually says what he's feeling. Sebastian lowered his eyes. You deserved that version from the beginning. Maybe. A sad smile touched her lips. But people become who they become when they're ready. For a long moment neither spoke. The crashing waves below filled the silence. Then Sebastian finally looked at her. Victoria. Yes. I love you. The words arrived without hesitation. Without calculation. Without fear. 3 simple words. Victoria stared at him. For years she had imagined hearing them. During lonely nights. During failed anniversaries. During countless moments when she had needed reassurance and received silence instead. Now they had finally been spoken. Yet instead of immediate happiness, a complicated ache spread through her chest. I know, she whispered. Sebastian frowned. That's not the response I expected. What response were you expecting? I don't know. He laughed bitterly. Maybe something encouraging. Victoria looked away. You waited until after the divorce. Every ounce of regret in Sebastian's life seemed to settle on his shoulders at once. I know. You waited until I left. I know. You waited until losing me hurt. His voice grew quiet. I know. Victoria closed her eyes. The truth wasn't cruel. It was simply true. Sebastian accepted it without defense. Eventually she opened her eyes again. I don't know what happens next. Neither do I. Good. She looked back at him. Because I'm tired of pretending certainty exists when it doesn't. Something about that answer gave Sebastian hope. Not because she had forgiven him. Not because she had accepted his love. But because she hadn't rejected the possibility of a future. Before either could say more, footsteps echoed from deeper within the cave system. Both immediately became alert. Sebastian drew his weapon. The sound grew closer. Then a familiar voice emerged from the darkness. If you shoot me, I'm going to be very annoyed. Marcus stepped into view covered in dust and dried blood. Victoria laughed in relief. Sebastian lowered his gun. You look terrible. Thank you. Marcus collapsed onto a nearby rock. Nice to know friendship is alive and well. He carried important news. Through contacts inside Sebastian's company, he had uncovered Valen's primary headquarters. Not a mansion. Not a corporate office. An isolated fortress hidden within an abandoned industrial district outside the city. More importantly, intelligence suggested Valen himself was currently there. The opportunity might never come again. This is our chance, Marcus said. Sebastian studied the information carefully. It's also a trap. Definitely. Then why tell me? Marcus shrugged. Because you're going anyway. Sebastian couldn't argue. Victoria listened quietly. Eventually she stood. Then I'm coming too. Both men immediately objected. Absolutely not. No chance. Victoria folded her arms. Thank you for demonstrating exactly why I should come. Sebastian rubbed his forehead. Victoria. No. She stepped closer. Every decision about my life has been made by someone else for months. Criminals. Security teams. You. Because people are trying to kidnap you. And because nobody listens when I speak. Her frustration exploded with unexpected force. I am not cargo. I'm not a hostage waiting to happen. I'm a person. The cave fell silent. Sebastian realized she was right. Again. Eventually he nodded. Fine. Victoria blinked. Fine. Fine. Marcus looked stunned. That worked. Sebastian sighed. I've been married to her. Several days later, after careful preparation, they returned to the city under false identities. The familiar skyline rose against the horizon, glittering beneath evening sunlight. Yet everything felt different now. The city had become a battlefield. Hidden allies joined their efforts. Former intelligence officers, investigators, security specialists, people Sebastian trusted with his life. Together they developed a plan. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it offered a chance to end the threat permanently. On the night of the operation, rain fell steadily across the industrial district. Massive abandoned factories loomed like dark giants beneath storm clouds. Sebastian's team moved into position around Valin's fortress. Communication devices crackled quietly. Surveillance feeds confirmed heavy security. Armed guards patrolled every entrance. Spotlights swept across courtyards. Inside one of the upper levels, thermal imaging identified a figure matching Valin's description. The target was present. "This is it," Marcus said through the radio. Sebastian looked toward Victoria. She wore protective gear and carried communication equipment. Their eyes met briefly. No words were necessary. Then the operation began. Teams advanced through multiple entry points simultaneously. Silent alarms were disabled. Security systems failed one by one. For several tense minutes everything proceeded according to plan. Then disaster struck. Someone had betrayed them again. Emergency sirens erupted throughout the compound. Floodlights activated. Heavy steel doors slammed shut. Armed guards flooded every corridor. Marcus's voice exploded through the communication channel. "It's compromised. Everyone move." Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Chaos spread instantly. Sebastian grabbed Victoria's hand and pulled her toward an emergency route while bullets ricocheted from nearby walls. Explosions shook the building. Smoke filled the air. Their carefully constructed operation was collapsing. Then, amid the confusion, Victoria saw a familiar face emerging from the shadows ahead. Adrian Cross. Valin's son. The traitor smiled calmly while dozens of armed men surrounded them. "I've been looking forward to this," Adrian said. Sebastian stepped in front of Victoria. Adrian's smile widened. "Perfect." Behind him, enormous steel doors slowly opened. A tall figure emerged from the darkness beyond. Older than Sebastian expected. Calm. Immaculately dressed. Dangerous without needing to prove it. Valin had finally appeared in person. And judging by the satisfaction in his eyes, everything unfolding around them was exactly what he had planned. Rain hammered the metal roof above them while the massive industrial chamber echoed with alarms, distant gunfire, and the grinding sound of machinery awakening somewhere deep within the complex. Sebastian stood motionless in front of Victoria, his injured shoulder aching beneath his jacket, yet his focus never wavered from the man approaching through the shadows. Valin moved with unsettling calm, as though he were entering a private dinner rather than the center of a battle. Silver streaks ran through his dark hair, and his expression carried none of the rage Sebastian had imagined over the past months. Instead, he looked amused. That frightened Sebastian more than anger would have. "Mr. Laurent," Valin said pleasantly. "I've wanted to meet you properly for a very long time." Sebastian kept his weapon raised. "The feeling isn't mutual." Valin chuckled. "Direct. Good." His gaze shifted toward Victoria. "And there she is." Adrian stepped aside slightly, allowing several armed men to reposition around them. Escape routes disappeared one by one. Victoria felt the trap tightening. Yet strangely, fear wasn't the dominant emotion rising inside her now. It was anger. Her entire life had become collateral damage in a war she never chose. She was tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of being discussed like an object everyone wanted to possess. Valin studied her with clinical interest. "You've caused more trouble than you realize." Victoria folded her arms. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing about you." Adrian laughed unexpectedly. Even Valin looked mildly surprised. "I understand why Sebastian loves you. Sebastian's attention snapped toward Valin. Leave her out of this. Valin ignored him. Do you know what makes powerful men vulnerable, Victoria? Their egos, she replied. Several guards exchanged uncomfortable glances. Valin smiled. Sometimes. More often, it's attachment. His eyes drifted toward Sebastian. The moment someone becomes important, they become leverage. Victoria looked directly back at him. Then you've misunderstood something. Valin raised an eyebrow. Have I? I'm not leverage. For a second something flickered behind Valin's eyes. Not fear. Not anger. Respect. Before he could answer, an explosion thundered from another section of the compound. The entire building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Gunfire intensified outside. Marcus's team was still fighting. Adrian touched an earpiece and frowned. Eastern perimeter breached. Valin sighed softly. Incompetence remains humanity's most reliable trait. Then his attention returned to Sebastian. Tell me, was it worth it? Sebastian didn't answer. Valin continued. You destroyed operations that took me 15 years to build. Criminal operations. Businesses. Human trafficking isn't business. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Valin's pleasant demeanor vanished for the first time. Careful. Sebastian's expression hardened. No. You be careful. The two men stared at one another across the chamber. Opposite philosophies. Opposite worlds. One built power through fear. The other had spent much of his life building power through control. Yet only one of them had learned the difference between strength and possession. Valin eventually smiled again, but the warmth was gone. Kill him. The command came casually, as if ordering coffee. The guards immediately raised their weapons. Then everything happened at once. The lights exploded. Total darkness swallowed the room. Gunshots erupted from multiple directions. Someone screamed. Sebastian grabbed Victoria and dragged her toward cover. Flashbang grenades detonated nearby, filling the darkness with blinding bursts of white light. Marcus's voice roared through the chaos. Surprise. Apparently he had finally reached the chamber. The battle descended into complete disorder. Sebastian and Victoria moved through smoke-filled corridors while teams clashed throughout the facility. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. Alarms shrieked endlessly. Somewhere behind them, Adrian was issuing commands. Somewhere ahead, Valin was escaping. He'll have an extraction route, Sebastian said while running. Then we find it. Victoria kept pace beside him. They turned a corner and nearly collided with Marcus. His suit was torn. One eyebrow was bleeding. He looked thrilled. Good news. What? Sebastian asked. I've identified Valin's escape path. And the bad news? Marcus pointed downward. It's underground. The underground section of the compound turned out to be far larger than anyone expected. Beneath the factories existed an enormous network of tunnels, storage facilities, and transport routes dating back decades. Old train tracks disappeared into darkness. Rusted machinery filled cavernous chambers. Water dripped from concrete ceilings. The deeper they went, the more the place felt like an abandoned city hidden beneath the living one. Eventually they reached a central junction. Multiple tunnels branched outward. Fresh footprints marked one route. Sebastian crouched beside them. Valin. They followed. The pursuit lasted nearly 20 minutes through twisting passageways. Along the way they encountered scattered resistance. Some surrendered. Others fought. The deeper they traveled, the clearer one fact became. Valin had been preparing for escape long before tonight. This wasn't a headquarters. It was a contingency plan. Then they found the train. An old industrial rail platform stretched before them. A black locomotive waited on the tracks with several attached cars. Engines rumbled. Steam hissed. Workers hurried aboard carrying crates and equipment. The operation was already moving. At the far end of the platform stood Valin and Adrian. They're leaving. Marcus shouted. Gunfire erupted instantly. Chaos exploded across the platform. Workers scattered. Guards returned fire. The train began moving. Slowly at first. Then faster. Sebastian sprinted forward. Victoria followed. Victoria, Marcus yelled. That wasn't a suggestion. She ignored him. The train accelerated. Adrian climbed aboard one of the rear cars. Valin followed. Sebastian reached the moving train and grabbed a handrail. For a terrifying second he nearly slipped. Then he pulled himself aboard. Victoria jumped next. Strong hands caught her arm. Sebastian hauled her upward. Behind them, Marcus stared in disbelief. You know what? He shouted while running after the train. Fine. He leaped. Somehow he made it too. The chase continued atop moving train cars racing through underground tunnels. Wind roared around them. Darkness flashed by on both sides. Rainwater leaked through cracks in the ceiling above. The entire sequence felt unreal. 1 year earlier Victoria had been organizing art exhibitions. Now she was sprinting across train rooftops beneath a city while criminals exchanged gunfire around her. Adrian appeared ahead carrying a pistol. He fired twice. Sebastian tackled Victoria. Bullets screamed overhead. Marcus returned fire. Adrian disappeared behind another car. The pursuit intensified. Car by car they advanced toward the front of the train. Eventually Sebastian caught up with Adrian inside a cargo compartment filled with shipping containers. The confrontation happened quickly and violently. Years of betrayal fueled Adrian's attacks. Years of regret fueled Sebastian's defense. They crashed through stacks of cargo. Exchanged blows. Fought across narrow walkways. Neither held back. Finally Sebastian gained the advantage. Adrian stumbled backward toward an open side door. The speeding tunnel blurred beyond it. You should have died years ago, Adrian spat. Sebastian shook his head. You wasted your life following someone who sees people as tools. Adrian laughed bitterly. You mean like you used to? The words struck hard because they were true. For a brief second Sebastian hesitated. Adrian lunged. The movement backfired. His footing slipped. Suddenly he was falling. Sebastian reacted instinctively and grabbed his wrist. Adrian dangled above darkness outside the train. For several seconds neither spoke. Sebastian strained to hold him. Adrian stared upward in disbelief. Why? He asked. Sebastian's answer came immediately. Because I'm not him. Adrian's expression changed. Something complicated flashed across his face. Regret. Shame. Exhaustion. Then his grip loosened. Sebastian tried to hold on. Adrian deliberately let go. He vanished into darkness. Sebastian remained frozen for several moments afterward. Meanwhile, farther ahead, Victoria finally confronted Valin. The older man stood alone in the engine car. Rain drummed against metal walls. The train thundered through darkness. Valin looked almost peaceful. You came a long way, he observed. Victoria blocked the doorway. It's over. People always say that. He glanced toward approaching lights in the distance. They're usually wrong. Victoria noticed something alarming. The tracks ahead led toward a partially collapsed section of tunnel. Warning signals flashed red. Valin smiled when he saw her realization. You see it now. You're going to crash the train. No. His expression remained calm. We're all going to crash the train. Victoria felt genuine horror for the first time. This wasn't an escape. It was revenge. If Valin couldn't win, he intended to destroy everyone involved. Behind her, Sebastian appeared. He immediately saw the danger. Get away from him. Valin laughed softly. Still protecting her. Always. The answer came without hesitation. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Valin noticed. Interesting. The train accelerated. The collapsed tunnel rushed closer every second. Red warning lights reflected across their faces. There was no time left. No easy solution. Only a desperate choice that would determine who survived the next few minutes and who did not. And as Sebastian stepped forward while the doomed train hurtled toward disaster, Victoria suddenly realized exactly what he intended to do. No. The word left Victoria's mouth before Sebastian had spoken a single sentence. She knew him too well now. Perhaps she always had. The look in his eyes was unmistakable. It was the same expression he wore when he stepped in front of danger without considering the cost. The same expression he had worn outside the estate when bullets started flying. The same expression he had worn in the hospital when he kept asking whether she was hurt while bleeding through his own shirt. Sebastian glanced toward her, and that brief look confirmed everything. He had already made his decision. Sebastian, don't. The train thundered forward. The collapsed section of tunnel was less than a minute away. Sparks flashed along the tracks. Emergency warning lights painted the engine compartment in violent shades of red. Valin remained surprisingly relaxed. This is the problem with love, he said almost conversationally. People start believing sacrifice is noble. Sebastian ignored him. His attention was entirely on Victoria. Listen carefully. No. She stepped closer. I'm done listening to plans that involve you getting yourself killed. Victoria, no. Her voice cracked. Absolutely not. For a moment the noise of the train seemed distant. Everything narrowed to the space between them. 3 years of marriage. 1 year of separation. Months of danger. Countless mistakes. Countless things left unsaid. Sebastian reached for her hand. I spent too much of my life deciding things for both of us. His voice was steady. Despite the chaos around them. I'm not doing that now. Victoria stared at him. Then stop acting like you're about to. A faint smile touched his face. Even now. Even here. She was arguing with him. Somehow that made him love her more. Marcus suddenly burst into the engine compartment carrying enough bruises to suggest he had fought half the train. Good news, he announced breathlessly. I found a way to stop the train. Sebastian looked hopeful. And the bad news? Marcus pointed toward the front engine controls. It's completely insane. That's usually your specialty. Thank you. Marcus moved toward the control panel. Unfortunately, there's another problem. Everyone followed his gaze. The controls had been destroyed. Wires hung from shattered panels. Critical systems had been smashed beyond repair. Valin smiled. I was thorough. Marcus stared at the wreckage. I hate him. The train roared onward. The collapsed tunnel entrance was visible now through the front windows. Concrete debris blocked most of the track ahead. At their current speed, impact would be catastrophic. Sebastian's mind raced through possibilities. None looked promising. Then Victoria noticed something. A maintenance schematic mounted beside the wall. Her eyes scanned it quickly. Wait. Sebastian turned. What? She pointed toward a section of the diagram. This rail line connects to an emergency diversion system. Marcus frowned. Diversion where? Victoria followed the route marked on the schematic. Then her eyes widened. An old cargo tunnel. Sebastian immediately understood. If we switch tracks, the train misses the collapse. Can it handle the turn? Marcus asked. Victoria studied the numbers. At this speed. She grimaced. Probably not. Probably? Marcus echoed. That's the confidence level we're using. There wasn't time for a better option. Sebastian moved immediately. Where's the switch control? Victoria pointed toward a maintenance access corridor running alongside the tracks. Outside. Marcus blinked. Outside? Yes. As in attached to a moving train outside? Victoria nodded. Marcus sighed heavily. This friendship has become extremely demanding. Before anyone could stop him, Sebastian headed toward the access door. Victoria grabbed his arm. No. He looked back. Victoria. Every dangerous job doesn't automatically belong to you. I'm the one trained for this. I'm the one who found it. Victoria. Sebastian. Marcus looked between them. This feels like the worst possible time for relationship growth. Neither acknowledged him. Finally Sebastian stepped closer. His voice softened. If something happens to you, Victoria interrupted him. If something happens to you, what exactly do you think happens to me? The question hit him harder than any punch. For a moment neither spoke. Then Victoria placed a hand against his chest. We're either getting through this together or not at all. Something shifted behind Sebastian's eyes. Not because she was right. She often was. It was because for the first time he truly understood what partnership meant. Not protection. Not sacrifice. Not carrying every burden alone. Together. He nodded once. Together. Marcus immediately pointed toward the door. Wonderful. Now let's survive so you can continue this emotional breakthrough later. The next 30 seconds became a blur of action. Sebastian and Victoria secured safety harnesses. Marcus coordinated from inside the engine compartment. Wind exploded around them as they climbed onto a narrow maintenance platform running along the side of the moving train. Rain lashed their faces. Metal vibrated beneath their feet. The rushing darkness around them felt endless. The track diversion mechanism appeared ahead. An ancient control assembly mounted beside the rails. To activate it, someone would need to reach a manual lever extending dangerously close to the moving track system. Sebastian and Victoria advanced together. The train shook violently. Victoria nearly lost her footing. Sebastian caught her. She immediately pulled him upright when he slipped moments later. Neither commented on it. They simply kept moving. Ahead, the collapsed tunnel loomed closer. Seconds remained. Now. Marcus shouted through their earpieces. Sebastian grabbed the lever. It wouldn't move. Rust had frozen the mechanism. He pulled harder. Nothing. Victoria joined him. Together they strained against decades of corrosion. The lever shifted slightly. Then stopped. The train screamed forward. 20 seconds. 15. 10. Again. Victoria yelled. They pulled with everything they had. The mechanism finally broke free. The lever slammed downward. Somewhere ahead, enormous track components shifted with a thunderous metallic crash. Sparks erupted across the rails. The train entered the diversion point. For one terrifying moment it felt as though the entire locomotive would derail. Wheels shrieked. Metal groaned. Cars swayed violently. Then the train lurched onto the alternate track. The collapsed tunnel flashed past on their left. Mere yards away. They had made it. Relief lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then another problem appeared. The diversion tunnel ended at a dead industrial loading yard filled with abandoned equipment. The train was still moving far too fast. Marcus. Sebastian shouted. Working on it, came the reply. How's that going? Poorly. Inside the engine compartment, Marcus and Valin had become engaged in a surprisingly aggressive fight involving tools, broken machinery, and a fire extinguisher. Neither participant looked particularly dignified. Eventually Marcus managed to shove Valin away from the controls. He located an emergency braking system hidden beneath a maintenance panel. Found it. Can you stop the train? Sebastian asked. Marcus examined the mechanism. Maybe. Maybe. I continue to dislike that word. He pulled the emergency release. Every brake on the train engaged simultaneously. The result was spectacular. The train screeched across the rails. Sparks erupted everywhere. Cars slammed into one another. People were thrown off their feet. The entire locomotive shuddered violently as momentum fought against metal. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the train finally stopped. Silence followed. Broken only by the ticking of cooling machinery. Nobody moved at first. Nobody trusted that it was truly over. Then Victoria laughed. It started unexpectedly. A small breathless sound. Soon Sebastian joined her. Then Marcus. Relief flooded through them all at once. They were alive. The laughter ended abruptly when they realized Valin was gone. Sebastian's smile vanished instantly. Where is he? They searched the train. Every compartment. Every storage area. Every exit. Nothing. Valin had disappeared during the confusion. Outside, Emergency sirens echoed in the distance. Authorities were finally closing in. Search teams surrounded the industrial yard. Helicopters appeared overhead. Yet despite extensive efforts, Valin remained missing. By dawn, the compound had been secured. Hundreds of arrests followed. Criminal networks collapsed. Financial records were seized. Operations spanning multiple countries unraveled within days. The empire Valin had spent decades building began crumbling almost immediately. But its creator had vanished. 2 weeks later, life slowly started returning to normal. At least as normal as possible. Victoria resumed work at the foundation. Marcus spent several interviews pretending he wasn't secretly enjoying media attention. Sebastian returned to his company and initiated sweeping reforms that surprised nearly everyone. Executives who valued loyalty over ethics disappeared. Employee programs expanded. Charitable investments increased dramatically. The company began changing in visible ways. So did Sebastian. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, Victoria received a message asking her to meet at a rooftop garden overlooking downtown. She arrived just after sunset. White roses filled the space. The same flowers she used to place on their dining table every Monday. Sebastian stood waiting near the center of the garden. No security teams. No emergencies. No gunfire. Just him. Victoria approached slowly. You planned this. I did. Should I be worried? Only if you hate flowers. She glanced around. I don't. For a moment neither spoke. The city lights sparkled below them. Finally Sebastian took a breath. I spent years treating our marriage like an obligation. Victoria listened quietly. Then I spent months trying to win you back. He shook his head slightly. The problem is that both approaches were about what I wanted. She watched him carefully. He continued. So this isn't a speech about second chances. Victoria looked surprised. It's not. No. He smiled faintly. This is me telling you something I should have said years ago. He stepped closer. Thank you. She blinked. For what? For loving me when I didn't deserve it. His voice remained steady. For leaving when staying would have broken you. Victoria felt emotion tightening in her chest. Sebastian continued. And for giving me the opportunity to become someone better. The rooftop fell silent. No dramatic declarations followed. No pressure. No expectations. Just honesty. The thing she had wanted all along. Sebastian smiled softly. Whether we're together or not, I needed you to know that. Victoria stared at him for several long seconds. Then she stepped forward. And before he could say another word, she kissed him. The city lights glittered beneath the night sky while years of distance finally disappeared between them. Neither knew exactly what the future would look like. There would be challenges. Trust would take time. Healing would take time. Love, real love, would require effort from both of them. But for the first time, they would face those things together. And somewhere far beyond the city, hidden in darkness, a man named Valin watched a news report about the collapse of his empire. He switched off the television and disappeared into the shadows once more, leaving behind one final unanswered question. Was the war truly over? Or had it only entered a quieter chapter? 3 months passed before anyone heard Valin's name again. For Victoria, those months felt almost unreal. The danger that had dominated her life for so long gradually receded into the background. She returned to organizing exhibitions, fundraising events, and educational programs through the foundation. Children filled gallery halls with laughter. Young artists presented work inspired by stories of resilience and hope. For the first time in years, her days belonged to her again. Yet life was different now in ways she hadn't expected. Sebastian remained part of it. Not as a husband. Not yet. Not even officially as a boyfriend for the first several weeks. They moved carefully, rebuilding something that had once collapsed under neglect. Instead of extravagant gestures, Sebastian focused on consistency. He called when he said he would call. He showed up when he promised he would show up. He listened. Sometimes the changes seemed almost comical. One afternoon Victoria spent 10 minutes staring at him across a restaurant table. "What?" Sebastian finally asked. "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For you to cancel dinner because of a business meeting." Sebastian blinked. "I already cancelled the meeting." Victoria narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Voluntarily?" "Yes." "Without being forced?" "Victoria." She laughed. "I'm just making sure you're real." Their relationship wasn't perfect. Sometimes old habits resurfaced. Sebastian occasionally slipped into problem-solving mode when Victoria wanted understanding rather than solutions. Victoria occasionally expected disappointment before giving him the opportunity to prove her wrong. But unlike before, they addressed those issues openly. They learned. They adjusted. They kept moving forward. Marcus, meanwhile, declared himself emotionally exhausted from witnessing their growth. "Do you know how difficult it is being surrounded by healthy communication?" he complained during lunch one afternoon. "It's exhausting." Victoria smiled. "Nobody asked you to stay. And miss this?" Marcus gestured dramatically between them. "Absolutely not." Despite his complaints, Marcus remained one of their closest friends. Beneath the sarcasm and constant jokes, his loyalty never wavered. He had nearly died beside them more than once. That kind of bond didn't disappear. On a warm autumn evening, Victoria and Sebastian attended the opening of the Foundation's largest exhibition to date. Hundreds of guests filled the gallery. Music drifted through elegant halls. Paintings, sculptures, and photographs lined every wall. Victoria moved confidently through the crowd, speaking with artists and donors alike. Watching her, Sebastian felt something he rarely experienced anymore. Pride. Not because she was associated with him. Not because of her beauty. Because she had built something meaningful entirely on her own. She belonged here. As the evening progressed, a young reporter approached Sebastian. "Mr. Laurent." Sebastian turned politely. "Yes." "What role did you play in helping organize this event?" Sebastian glanced across the room toward Victoria, who was enthusiastically discussing a painting with a group of students. A small smile appeared. "None." The reporter looked confused. "None. This is her achievement." The answer spread through local media the following day. Most people overlooked it. Victoria didn't. She read the interview twice before quietly setting her phone aside. Years ago, Sebastian would have accepted credit without hesitation. The fact that he no longer wanted it mattered more than he realized. Life continued. Weeks became months. Winter arrived. Then, on a snowy evening in January, everything changed again. Sebastian was leaving a board meeting when his private phone rang. Only a handful of people possessed that number. He answered immediately. "Sebastian." Silence greeted him. Then a voice he hadn't heard in months spoke calmly into the receiver. "Good evening." Sebastian stopped walking. Every muscle in his body tightened. Valin. Across the city, Victoria sat in her apartment reviewing event proposals when her lights suddenly flickered. Her phone buzzed simultaneously. A photograph appeared on the screen. It showed Sebastian exiting his office building less than 2 minutes earlier. Another image followed. Then another. Someone was watching him. Victoria immediately called Sebastian. The line was busy. Fear returned with shocking speed. Meanwhile, Sebastian listened as Valin spoke. "I owe you an apology." Sebastian said nothing. "My empire collapsed. My son is dead. Most of my assets are frozen." Valin sounded almost reflective. "Objectively speaking, you've had an excellent year. What do you want?" Sebastian asked. A pause followed. Then Valin laughed softly. "Closure." The call ended. Sebastian immediately contacted Marcus. Within minutes they launched emergency protocols. Teams traced the phone signal. Investigators reviewed surveillance networks. Every available resource activated. Yet nothing useful emerged. The call had originated from multiple locations simultaneously through sophisticated routing systems. It was impossible to pinpoint. The uncertainty proved worse than a direct threat. Days passed. Then weeks. Nothing happened. No attacks. No sightings. No demands. The silence became unbearable. Victoria found herself checking reflections in windows. Sebastian increased security despite hating the necessity. Marcus grew increasingly frustrated. I wish he'd either disappear forever or try something. Careful what you wish for, Victoria replied. Marcus immediately agreed. Fair point. Then, on a rainy afternoon in February, a breakthrough finally arrived. Authorities intercepted encrypted communications linked to remnants of Valin's organization. The information pointed toward a remote island located hundreds of miles offshore. Satellite imagery revealed unusual activity. Cargo shipments. Private aircraft. Construction projects. Someone was rebuilding. Sebastian studied the intelligence reports inside a secure conference room. Victoria sat beside him. Marcus paced nearby. The conclusion seemed obvious. Valin wasn't hiding. He was preparing. We have enough evidence for an international operation, one investigator explained. Several governments are cooperating. Sebastian nodded slowly. When? Soon. The operation launched 12 days later. Naval vessels surrounded the island before dawn. Aircraft monitored every escape route. Specialized teams moved ashore under cover of darkness. Everything proceeded flawlessly. Almost too flawlessly. When investigators reached the main compound, they discovered it abandoned. Computer systems had been wiped. Buildings stood empty. Equipment remained behind, but people were gone. Valin had vanished again. Yet this time he left something unexpected. A letter addressed specifically to Sebastian. Authorities delivered it later that evening. Victoria and Marcus sat nearby as Sebastian opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page. He read it silently. Then again. Finally Victoria asked, "What does it say?" Sebastian handed her the letter. The message was surprisingly short. It read, "You were right about one thing. Power built on fear eventually collapses. I learned that too late. The game is finished. Take care of the woman you nearly lost. Some mistakes only deserve one opportunity to be corrected." Victoria lowered the letter slowly. Marcus looked confused. That's it. That's it. Nobody knew what to make of the message. Some believed it was manipulation. Others suspected a trap. Extensive investigations continued for months, but no trace of Valin ever resurfaced. Eventually the world moved on. Whether he was dead, hiding, or genuinely finished remained a mystery. For Victoria, the uncertainty gradually stopped mattering. She had spent too much time allowing fear to dictate her life. She refused to continue. Spring arrived. Cherry blossoms colored city parks. The foundation expanded into multiple regions. Sebastian's company thrived under new leadership principles. Life became busy in ordinary ways. Beautiful ways. Then came a Saturday morning unlike any other. Victoria woke to discover Sebastian missing from her apartment. She found a note waiting on the kitchen counter. It contained only an address and a request, "Trust me." She rolled her eyes immediately. Dangerous sentence. Nevertheless, she followed the directions. The address led outside the city toward rolling countryside she didn't recognize. Eventually she arrived at a large property overlooking a lake. Construction crews moved throughout the area. Landscapers planted trees. Workers assembled structures. Victoria stepped from her car, confused. Sebastian approached with an unusually nervous expression. That alone alarmed her. "Why do you look terrified?" she asked. "Because this is important." "Should I be worried?" "Probably." Victoria laughed. "Sebastian." He gestured toward the property. "Walk with me." They followed a winding path through partially completed gardens. As they walked, Victoria gradually realized what she was seeing. Art studios. Exhibition spaces. Educational buildings. Community centers. Everything connected into a single enormous project. Her project. She stopped walking. "What is this?" Sebastian looked at her carefully. You once told me the foundation could help 10 times more people if funding and space weren't limitations. Victoria stared at the property. Understanding slowly dawned. You built this? We're building it. Her eyes widened. Sebastian. Before you yell at me, listen. She crossed her arms. I'm listening. You changed my life. His voice remained steady. Not because you loved me. Because you challenged me. He took a breath. This place isn't a gift. It isn't charity. He handed her a folder containing legal documents. It's yours. Victoria opened the folder. Ownership records. Governance structures. Financial protections. Independent control. Complete autonomy. She looked up in disbelief. You can't be serious. Very serious. For several seconds she simply stared at him. Then she did something unexpected. She began crying. Not dramatic tears. Quiet ones. The kind that appeared when emotions became too large for words. Sebastian immediately looked concerned. Is that good? Victoria laughed through tears. You still don't know? Not always. She shook her head and stepped closer. It's good. Relief flooded his face. The two stood together overlooking the future she had once only imagined. And as sunlight reflected across the lake and workers continued building dreams into reality around them, Victoria realized something important. Love hadn't saved them. Love alone never could have. What saved them was growth. Accountability. Forgiveness. Choice. Every day they chose each other again. Not because a contract required it. Not because circumstances forced it. But because after losing everything once, they finally understood its value. And for the first time since signing those divorce papers years ago, Victoria felt completely certain about the future standing in front of her. It was not perfect. It was not guaranteed. But it was theirs. Together. The end. A year later, Victoria would occasionally stand on the highest balcony of the lakeside campus and smile at how wrong she had been about endings. The day she believed her story with Sebastian had reached its conclusion had actually been the beginning of an entirely different chapter. The Arts and Education Center had grown far beyond anything either of them imagined. Children from disadvantaged communities attended workshops every week. Young musicians practiced in recording studios. Painters worked in sunlit spaces overlooking the lake. Families gathered for community events that filled the grounds with laughter long after sunset. What began as a dream had become a living place, one that changed lives every day. Yet despite all the growth around her, Victoria still found herself amused by the smallest changes in Sebastian. One morning she walked into a meeting room and discovered him sitting on the floor surrounded by 8-year-olds who were teaching him how to paint cartoon animals. What happened to the ruthless businessman? She asked. One little girl immediately answered for him. He's bad at rabbits. Sebastian held up a painting that vaguely resembled a rabbit involved in a tragic accident. Art is subjective. The children disagreed loudly. Victoria laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. Life had become filled with moments like that. Ordinary moments. Precious moments. The kind people rarely appreciate until they nearly lose them. Later that same evening, after the campus closed for the day, Victoria and Sebastian walked beside the lake beneath a sky crowded with stars. Spring air carried the scent of flowers from nearby gardens. Neither was in a hurry to reach anywhere. Remember our first year of marriage? Victoria asked suddenly. Sebastian groaned. Which disaster are we discussing? The charity auction. He covered his face immediately. Absolutely not. Victoria ignored him. You accidentally bid $300,000 on a sculpture because you weren't paying attention. It was a misunderstanding. You thought you were raising your hand to ask for water. Sebastian sighed heavily. Why preserve embarrassing memories so carefully? Victoria smiled. Because they're funny. Sebastian eventually laughed too. The memories no longer hurt. They belonged to people who had changed. People who had learned. Ahead of them, lights from the campus reflected across the lake like scattered stars. Sebastian slipped his hand into hers. Such a simple gesture. Yet there had been a time when it would have felt impossible. They continued walking. Neither noticed the black SUV parked beyond the distant tree line. The vehicle remained hidden in darkness. Its occupants observed the campus through high-powered cameras before quietly driving away. The following week, strange events began occurring. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Small things. Security systems registered unidentified vehicles near the property. Anonymous inquiries appeared regarding Victoria's schedule. Several individuals attempted to gain access to restricted areas using false credentials. None succeeded. Still, a pattern emerged. Sebastian reviewed the reports late one night inside his office. The old instincts he hoped never to use again began awakening. Marcus arrived shortly afterward carrying 2 coffees and a deeply unimpressed expression. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Sebastian handed him the files. Marcus read them silently. His smile disappeared. "Wonderful. You see it too?" Unfortunately, the incidents alone proved little. Yet together they suggested organized surveillance. Someone was studying them. Watching. Waiting. Victoria listened carefully when they explained their concerns the next morning. Unlike previous years, nobody attempted to make decisions without her. That alone demonstrated how much their relationship had changed. "Do we know who's responsible?" she asked. "No," Sebastian answered. "Could it be unrelated?" Marcus considered the possibility. "Maybe." Then he looked at the reports again. "I doubt it." Security increased discreetly. Investigators quietly examined leads. Weeks passed without major developments. Eventually concern began fading. Perhaps it truly had been nothing. Then came the gala. Every year the campus hosted a fundraising event attended by artists, philanthropists, educators, and community leaders. The gathering had become one of the most anticipated occasions in the region. Hundreds of guests arrived. Music filled elegant halls. Students displayed artwork created through the foundation's programs. The atmosphere felt joyful and alive. Victoria moved through the crowd greeting visitors while Sebastian spoke with donors. Marcus wandered between conversations pretending not to enjoy himself. Everything seemed normal. Until a waiter handed Victoria a sealed envelope. "A gentleman asked me to deliver this." Victoria frowned. "Which gentleman?" The waiter looked around. "I'm not sure." He left. A chill ran through her. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single photograph. Her smile vanished instantly. The image showed her standing beside the lake 2 nights earlier. She had no memory of anyone nearby when it was taken. Written across the back were 5 words. "We never really left." Victoria immediately found Sebastian. One look at her face told him something was wrong. She handed him the photograph. His expression hardened as he read the message. Marcus joined them moments later. Silence settled between the 3 of them. The past had returned. Not with gunfire. Not with explosions. Something quieter. More deliberate. More patient. "Valin?" Victoria asked. Sebastian studied the photograph. "Maybe." Marcus looked unconvinced. "No." Both turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Marcus tapped the image. "This doesn't feel like Valin." "Why not?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Because Valin always wanted people afraid." He pointed at the message. "This feels personal." Sebastian's eyes narrowed. The possibility had not occurred to him. Someone else. Someone new. Someone who knew enough about their history to exploit it. That possibility proved far more dangerous than a familiar enemy. Investigations resumed immediately. This time they uncovered something alarming. Over the previous year, multiple former associates of Valin had disappeared. Not arrested. Not killed. Recruited. Financial transactions connected those individuals to a newly established organization operating through shell corporations across several countries. The leadership remained unknown. Every trail ended abruptly. Every identity proved false. It was as though someone had studied Valin's mistakes and learned from them. Then another message arrived. This time it was delivered electronically through a secure network that should have been impossible to access. The message contained only a short video. Sebastian, Victoria, and Marcus watched it together. A distorted voice spoke from behind a digital mask. Valin built an empire on fear. You destroyed it. The voice paused. Thank you. The three exchanged confused glances. The speaker continued. Because now we can build something better. The screen went black. No demands. No threats. No explanation. Just a promise hidden inside a mystery. Marcus leaned back slowly. I officially hate this already. Sebastian couldn't disagree. Victoria stared at the blank screen. Every instinct told her this was different from anything they had faced before. The danger wasn't coming from someone driven by revenge. It was coming from someone driven by ambition. And ambition, she had learned long ago, could be far more unpredictable. Outside the window, the campus remained peaceful. Students attended classes. Artists worked in studios. Families enjoyed gardens beside the lake. Life continued as always. Yet somewhere beyond that peaceful horizon, unseen forces were moving once again. New players were entering the board. New secrets were waiting to be uncovered. And although neither Victoria nor Sebastian knew it yet, the next challenge facing them would test something far more fragile than survival. It would test the trust they had spent years rebuilding. And unlike bullets or kidnappings or criminal empires, trust was not something that could be protected with security teams or weapons. Once broken, it could take a lifetime to restore. As a storm gathered far beyond the lake and dark clouds slowly crept across the distant horizon, a new chapter quietly began. The first crack appeared where neither Victoria nor Sebastian expected it. Not through violence. Not through threats. Through information. 3 weeks after the mysterious video arrived, an investigative journalist published an article that spread across financial media within hours. The headline was simple but explosive. Questions surround Lauron Holdings acquisitions during criminal network investigation. The article contained no direct accusations. That was what made it dangerous. Instead, it asked questions. It highlighted transactions from years earlier. It referenced companies later connected to Valin's operations. It suggested that Sebastian's business empire might have benefited from relationships he never publicly acknowledged. Most readers saw speculation. Investors saw risk. Competitors saw opportunity. By noon, stock prices had begun fluctuating. By evening, television commentators were debating Sebastian's integrity. Marcus slammed his tablet onto a conference table. This is garbage. Sebastian remained calm while reviewing the article. Not entirely. Marcus blinked. What? Sebastian closed the file. Some of the transactions are real. Silence settled over the room. Victoria looked up sharply. Sebastian. He met her gaze. I didn't know they were connected to Valin at the time. But the deals happened. Yes. The honesty was immediate. Victoria appreciated that. Yet a knot still formed in her stomach. Because for the first time in years, she realized there were parts of Sebastian's past she still didn't fully understand. Within 48 hours, additional stories emerged. Anonymous sources supplied documents. Former executives gave interviews. Old business rivals suddenly found reasons to speak publicly. None of it proved criminal conduct. But that wasn't the goal. Someone was constructing a narrative. Piece by piece. Deliberately. They're not trying to destroy the company, Marcus concluded during a strategy meeting. They're trying to destroy trust. Sebastian nodded slowly. Victoria remained unusually quiet. That evening, after returning home, she sat alone on their terrace overlooking the city. Rain tapped softly against glass railings. Her phone buzzed. An unfamiliar message appeared. Against her better judgment, she opened it. A photograph loaded instantly. Her stomach dropped. The image showed Sebastian shaking hands with a man she recognized immediately from investigative files connected to Valin's former organization. The timestamp was from 7 years earlier. Another message followed. How much do you really know about him? Victoria stared at the screen. Then immediately deleted the message. Yet the question lingered. Not because she believed the sender. Because uncertainty had already been planted. When Sebastian arrived home later that night, he found her sitting in darkness. "Why aren't the lights on?" he asked gently. Victoria looked toward him. "Did you ever knowingly work with dangerous people?" Sebastian froze. Not because of guilt. Because he recognized exactly what was happening. He walked over and sat beside her. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally he answered, "Yes." Victoria appreciated the honesty. Yet hearing it still hurt. "How many?" "More than I'd like." "Did you know who they were?" Sebastian considered carefully. "Sometimes." The answer landed heavily. He continued before she could respond. "Not because I approved of them." "Then why?" He stared toward the rain. "Because 10 years ago I cared more about winning than consequences." Victoria remained silent. Sebastian laughed bitterly. "I wasn't a criminal." "I know. But I wasn't always a good man either." The vulnerability surprised her. Most people would have defended themselves. Sebastian simply told the truth. "There are decisions from that period I'm not proud of." His voice lowered. "If I could change them, I would." Victoria studied him carefully. The old Sebastian would have hidden those flaws. This version acknowledged them openly. Yet that didn't erase the reality that they existed. For the first time in years, an uncomfortable distance appeared between them. Small at first. Almost invisible. But real. Whoever was targeting them understood something dangerous. Trust rarely shattered all at once. More often, it eroded slowly. Over the following weeks, the campaign intensified. More information surfaced. More questions appeared. Most of it involved business activities from before Victoria had even met Sebastian. Yet each revelation forced difficult conversations. Some ended well. Others didn't. One evening they argued for the first time in months. Not about the facts themselves. About secrecy. "I can't tell you things I don't realize matter," Sebastian said. Victoria folded her arms. "That's easy to say after someone else reveals them." "What exactly do you want from me?" "The truth." "I've been giving you the truth." "After being confronted with it." The words hung between them. Sebastian looked genuinely hurt. "You think I'm hiding things?" Victoria hesitated. That hesitation alone was enough. The argument ended shortly afterward, neither satisfied. Across the city, inside a luxury penthouse registered under a false identity, a woman watched security footage from hidden cameras positioned outside Laurent Holdings headquarters. She appeared to be in her mid-30s. Elegant. Composed. Intelligent. Several computer screens displayed news coverage of Sebastian's ongoing difficulties. She smiled slightly. Progress. A man standing nearby nodded. "They're beginning to question each other." "Good." The woman zoomed in on an image of Victoria. "She's stronger than expected. Should we accelerate?" The woman considered. "No." Her smile widened. Trust collapses more effectively when people participate in the process themselves. The man glanced toward another screen displaying old photographs of Valin. "Your father would have preferred a direct attack." The woman's expression cooled instantly. "My father was brilliant." A pause followed. "And reckless." The revelation changed everything. Valin's son had died. But apparently his daughter had survived. She tapped a finger against the desk thoughtfully. Sebastian Laurent defeated an empire. Her eyes settled on Victoria's image. Let's see if he can survive honesty. Meanwhile, Marcus was conducting an investigation of his own. Unlike Sebastian and Victoria, he wasn't distracted by emotional complications. He focused on patterns, financial movements, digital footprints, behavioral inconsistencies. Eventually one anomaly caught his attention. Several shell companies connected to the recent information leaks shared a common legal representative. The name itself meant nothing. The address meant everything. Marcus stared at the file. "No way. 20 minutes later he was speeding through city traffic toward Sebastian's office. He arrived just before midnight. Sebastian was still working. Victoria had gone home earlier after another tense evening. Marcus entered without knocking. "I found something." Sebastian immediately recognized the seriousness in his voice. "What?" Marcus handed him the documents. Sebastian reviewed them carefully. His expression darkened. "You're certain?" 95%. "That's enough." The address connected directly to one of Valin's oldest operations. Not one publicly known. Not one appearing in criminal investigations. Something deeply buried. Something only a handful of people would have discovered. Sebastian leaned back slowly. A realization formed. "This isn't about business." Marcus nodded. "I know. It's personal. Very." Sebastian looked toward the city lights outside his office window. "Then we're dealing with family." The following morning, Victoria arrived at the campus early to prepare for an upcoming exhibition. The grounds were peaceful. Dew covered the gardens. Birds moved through flowering trees. For a few precious moments, life felt normal again. Then she entered her office and found someone waiting. The woman sat comfortably in a chair near the window. Elegant. Calm. Perfectly composed. Security should have stopped her long before she reached this room. Yet here she was. Victoria immediately recognized danger. The stranger smiled politely. "Good morning." Victoria didn't move closer. "Who are you?" The woman stood slowly. "My name is Elena." Her eyes carried a familiar cold intelligence. "And before we continue, I should probably mention something important." Victoria's pulse accelerated. Elena folded her hands. "I'm Valin's daughter." Silence filled the office. Elena continued speaking before Victoria could respond. "Please don't look so alarmed." Her smile remained pleasant. "If I wanted you dead, this would be a very different conversation." Victoria immediately reached for her phone. Elena shook her head. "You can call Sebastian if you'd like." The confidence behind the statement was unsettling. "In fact, I suspect he's already on his way." Victoria stared at her. "Why are you here?" Elena walked toward the window overlooking the campus. Students were beginning to arrive. Artists carried supplies between buildings. Ordinary life unfolded outside. "Because my father was wrong about many things." Victoria remained silent. Elena glanced back. "But he was correct about one." "Which was?" Elena's smile faded entirely. "Love is the most efficient vulnerability in existence." Victoria felt a chill. Not because of the words. Because Elena genuinely believed them. Somewhere along the way, she had inherited the worst parts of Valin without inheriting any of his limits. And as sirens suddenly echoed in the distance and Victoria realized Sebastian was indeed racing toward the campus, one terrifying thought emerged above all others. Valin had been dangerous because he wanted power. Elena might be far worse because she wanted understanding. She wasn't trying to destroy Sebastian and Victoria. She was studying them. Experimenting with them. Learning how they worked. And people like that rarely stopped after a single lesson. Victoria kept her phone in her hand but didn't dial. Not yet. Elena's presence was unsettling enough on its own. Calling security immediately felt logical, yet something in the woman's calm demeanor suggested she had anticipated every predictable response. Outside the office windows, students continued arriving for morning programs completely unaware that the daughter of one of the most dangerous men they had ever encountered was standing inside the building. Elena seemed almost fascinated by the activity beyond the glass. "This place is impressive," she said. "My father would have hated it." Victoria remained near the door. "I'm not interested in your father's opinions." "Neither am I." Elena's answer came instantly. "That's one of the reasons we disagreed." Before Victoria could respond, rapid footsteps echoed through the hallway. Seconds later Sebastian entered the office. 2 security personnel followed closely behind. The moment he saw Elena, his expression hardened into something Victoria hadn't witnessed in a long time. Not fear. Readiness. Elena turned toward him and smiled politely. There you are. Sebastian stepped between her and Victoria. Leave. Elena looked genuinely amused. We've barely started talking. You shouldn't be here. And yet I am. Her gaze shifted between them. Interesting. Sebastian's patience disappeared. What do you want? Elena studied him carefully before answering. A conversation. Marcus appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, breathing hard from having apparently run across half the campus. He took one look at Elena and groaned. Of course she's attractive. Everyone stared at him. Marcus shrugged. What? Villains are never accountants. Even Elena laughed. To Victoria's surprise, the sound was genuine. For the briefest moment, she seemed less like an enemy and more like a normal person. The observation disturbed Victoria more than she expected. Elena noticed the reaction. There it is. Sebastian narrowed his eyes. There what is? The mistake people always make. She looked toward Victoria. You expected me to look evil. I expected you to stay away. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Fair. Security personnel moved closer. Sebastian gestured toward the door. This conversation is over. Elena didn't resist. She simply reached into her purse and placed a small envelope on Victoria's desk. Not yet. Then she walked out voluntarily. Security followed immediately. The office remained silent for several seconds after she left. Finally Marcus pointed at the envelope. I vote we don't open the mysterious envelope from the criminal mastermind. Victoria agreed. Sebastian agreed. 30 seconds later they opened it. Inside was an invitation. A single location. A single date. A single message. If you want the truth, come alone. Marcus rubbed his forehead. I hate everyone involved in this. The meeting took place 4 days later. Not because they trusted Elena. Because they needed answers. After extensive preparation and security precautions, Sebastian arrived at the designated location, an old botanical conservatory abandoned years earlier outside the city. Sunlight filtered through cracked glass ceilings. Wild plants had reclaimed much of the structure. Vines climbed rusted metal supports. Nature and decay existed side by side. Elena was already there, sitting alone beside an empty fountain. She didn't appear surprised to see him. You brought surveillance. Sebastian remained standing. You expected otherwise? No. She smiled slightly. I would have been disappointed. Sebastian got straight to the point. Why target us? Elena considered the question. That's not actually what I've been doing. Really? Really? Sebastian folded his arms. Then explain. Elena stood slowly and walked toward the fountain. My father spent his life believing fear controlled people. Her fingers brushed against weathered stone. He was wrong. Sebastian listened carefully. What controls them? Elena looked up. The stories they tell themselves. The answer felt less like a statement and more like a philosophy. Elena continued. You tell yourself you've changed. Her gaze settled on Sebastian. Victoria tells herself she can trust you. And I wanted to know if those stories were true. Sebastian's expression darkened. You manipulated our lives for an experiment. No. She shook her head. I revealed information. Selective information. Still true information. The distinction irritated him because it contained a degree of truth. Elena watched his reaction carefully. You know what's fascinating? She asked. Most relationships survive lies. Sebastian said nothing. The ones that fail usually collapse under truth. That statement lingered in the air. Elena stepped closer. You weren't afraid of my father because he could hurt you. Her eyes sharpened. You were afraid because he could take Victoria away. Sebastian remained silent. Elena smiled faintly. And now you're afraid because she might walk away on her own. For the first time during the conversation, Sebastian looked genuinely affected. Elena noticed immediately. There it is. What? Honesty. Sebastian laughed humorlessly. You think this is about honesty? Everything is. She glanced upward toward sunlight filtering through broken glass. People spend their entire lives constructing versions of themselves. Her voice softened unexpectedly. Then they call it identity. For a moment Sebastian saw something beneath her carefully controlled exterior. Loneliness. It vanished almost instantly. "Why are you really here, Elena?" he asked. The question landed differently than the others. Elena looked away. "Because my father is dead." Sebastian froze. That wasn't the answer he expected. Elena continued quietly. 3 months after writing that letter, he died. The conservatory fell silent. "How?" Sebastian asked. Elena smiled sadly. "Cancer." The answer felt absurdly ordinary after everything Valin had been. He knew for years. Elena stared at the abandoned fountain. Most of what he built happened after the diagnosis. Sebastian didn't know what to say. Elena laughed softly. "Imagine that. Entire criminal empires created because someone couldn't accept mortality." She looked back at him. "Pathetic, isn't it?" For the first time, Sebastian understood something important. Elena wasn't continuing her father's work. She was trying to understand it. Trying to understand him. Trying to understand herself. Unfortunately, she was using dangerous methods to do it. "You could have approached us differently," he said. Elena nodded. "Probably. Then why didn't you?" A long pause followed. Finally she answered honestly. "Because I didn't know how." The admission changed the conversation. Not completely. Not enough to erase what she had done. But enough to reveal the person underneath. Elena wasn't driven by revenge. She wasn't even driven by power. She was searching for meaning in the ruins her father left behind. The problem was that she had inherited his tendency to treat people like puzzles rather than human beings. Later that evening, Sebastian returned home and told Victoria everything. She listened carefully. When he finished, neither spoke for a while. Finally Victoria asked, "Do you believe her?" Sebastian thought about it. "Partly. Same." They sat together on their terrace while city lights illuminated the horizon. For once, there were no immediate threats. No kidnappings. No gunfire. Just uncertainty. The following weeks brought more surprises. Elena disappeared from public view. The media campaign against Sebastian abruptly stopped. Anonymous leaks ceased. Financial attacks ended. It was as though someone had flipped a switch. Investigators continued searching for answers but found little. Then, one rainy afternoon, Victoria received a package at the campus. Inside was a single framed photograph. It showed children participating in one of the foundation's earliest programs. On the back was a handwritten note. "You were right. Some things are worth building." No signature appeared. None was necessary. Victoria smiled faintly and placed the photograph on a shelf in her office. Life gradually settled once more. Summer arrived. The campus expanded again. New partnerships formed. New students arrived. New opportunities emerged. One evening, nearly 6 years after Victoria had signed those divorce papers, she stood beside the lake watching a group of children launch handmade lanterns across the water. The sky glowed with sunset colors. Laughter echoed across the grounds. Sebastian approached quietly and stood beside her. "Beautiful," he said. Victoria nodded. "It is." They watched the lanterns drift for several moments. Then Sebastian cleared his throat. Victoria immediately looked suspicious. "Why do you sound nervous?" "I don't sound nervous." "You absolutely do." Sebastian sighed. "Fine." He reached into his pocket. Victoria's eyes widened instantly. "Sebastian. Before you say anything, oh no. Please let me finish." Victoria laughed despite herself. "This should be interesting." Sebastian turned toward her fully. Years earlier he would have prepared a speech. A strategy. A perfect presentation. This time he simply spoke from the heart. "The first time we got married, it was a contract." Victoria smiled softly. "I remember." "The second time." He paused. "I'd like it to be a choice." Then he held out a small ring. Not extravagant. Not designed to impress. Just meaningful. Honest. Real. Victoria stared at him. Tears immediately filled her eyes. You know, she said, laughing through emotion, for a ruthless businessman, your timing is terrible. Sebastian blinked. Is that a no? Victoria stepped forward and kissed him before he could panic further. When she finally pulled away, her smile answered the question long before her words did. Around them, hundreds of lanterns floated across the lake like stars scattered upon water. The campus they built together glowed warmly in the distance. The future remained uncertain, as all futures do. Challenges would come. Mistakes would happen. Life would continue changing. But this time there would be no contracts. No conditions. No expiration dates. Just two people who had lost each other, found each other again, and chosen to keep choosing each other every day after that. And as the last light of sunset faded beyond the horizon, their story finally reached the ending it had been moving toward all along. Not an ending built on rescue. Not an ending built on revenge. An ending built on trust. And that made all the difference. The wedding was supposed to be small. That was the plan. Victoria repeated it at least 20 times over the following months. Sebastian agreed every single time. Marcus agreed too, though nobody trusted his definition of small. Somehow, despite everyone's best intentions, the guest list expanded from 30 people to 120, then from 120 to nearly 300. Artists wanted to attend. Former students wanted to attend. Employees whose lives had been changed by the foundation wanted to attend. People who had witnessed Victoria and Sebastian's journey wanted to celebrate it. Eventually Victoria gave up trying to reduce the list. Fine, she told Sebastian one evening while reviewing seating arrangements. Apparently half the country is emotionally invested in our relationship. Sebastian looked over the guest count and nodded. That seems accurate. The wedding took place beside the lake on a warm autumn afternoon. The same lake where they had walked countless times. The same lake overlooking the campus that had become the center of so many lives. White flowers lined the ceremony path. Soft music drifted through the air. Children from foundation programs carried lanterns decorated with messages about hope, family, and second chances. Victoria stood beneath a canopy of flowering branches while sunlight reflected across the water behind her. When Sebastian first saw her walking toward him, every carefully prepared word vanished from his mind. Marcus, serving as best man, leaned over. Try breathing. Sebastian ignored him. Seriously, Marcus whispered. People will notice. Victoria reached the front of the ceremony space and smiled. The smile carried 6 years of history. 6 years of mistakes, growth, forgiveness, and choices. For a moment neither spoke. Neither needed to. Everyone present could see the story written across their faces. When the ceremony finally concluded and they kissed beneath a shower of flower petals, the applause seemed endless. Yet Victoria barely heard it. She was looking at Sebastian. This time there were no contracts. No expiration dates. No hidden conditions. Just a promise freely given and freely accepted. Later that night, long after the celebration began, Marcus stood alone near the water holding a glass of champagne. He watched lanterns drift across the lake and shook his head. I can't believe they actually made it. You sound surprised. Marcus turned. Elena stood beside him. Her appearance no longer triggered immediate alarm the way it once had. The past year had changed many things. After months of cooperation with authorities and extensive legal negotiations, she had dismantled much of what remained of her father's network. The process had been difficult and imperfect, but genuine. Trust still came slowly. Yet progress had been made. Marcus handed her a drink. I wasn't surprised they survived. He watched Victoria laughing with friends across the lawn. I was surprised they figured out how to be happy. Elena considered that. Most people never do. They stood quietly for a while. Then Elena glanced toward him. You're getting sentimental. Marcus immediately looked offended. Absolutely not. You are. One emotional observation does not constitute sentimentality. Elena laughed. The sound carried across the lake. For perhaps the first time in her life, she seemed genuinely at peace. Not fixed. Not healed entirely. But moving forward. And that mattered. Months passed after the wedding. Life settled into a rhythm neither Victoria nor Sebastian would have recognized years earlier. They worked. Traveled. Argued occasionally. Made up afterward. Built new projects. Supported one another through challenges. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just life. Yet Victoria gradually discovered something unexpected. Ordinary happiness required its own kind of courage. It was easier, in some ways, to survive crises than to trust peace. After spending so long anticipating disaster, part of her remained waiting for the next emergency. One evening she admitted as much while sitting with Sebastian on their terrace. "Do you ever worry?" she asked. "About what?" "That something will happen." Sebastian looked thoughtful. "Sometimes." Victoria nodded. "Me too." The city lights shimmered below them. Sebastian reached for her hand. "You know what I've learned?" "What?" "Something always happens." Victoria laughed softly. "That's not reassuring." "I'm not finished." He squeezed her hand gently. "The difference is that now we handle it together." Victoria smiled. There was wisdom in that. Life never stopped presenting challenges. It never promised certainty. The goal wasn't avoiding storms. The goal was finding someone worth facing them with. The following spring brought exciting news. The foundation received international recognition for its educational programs. Funding expanded dramatically. New campuses were planned in several regions. Journalists requested interviews. Educational organizations sought partnerships. Victoria found herself busier than ever. One afternoon, while reviewing proposals, she received an unexpected visitor. A teenage girl stood nervously outside her office. "Can I help you?" Victoria asked. The girl nodded. "I wanted to thank you." Victoria smiled politely. "For what?" The girl handed over a folder. Inside were sketches, paintings, and design concepts. "Remarkably talented work. 3 years ago I attended one of your workshops." Her voice trembled slightly. "Nobody believed I could do this." Victoria looked through the artwork carefully. "This is incredible." Tears appeared in the girl's eyes. "I got accepted into an art program." For a moment Victoria couldn't speak. She remembered struggling to find purpose after her divorce. She remembered feeling lost. Looking at the young artist standing before her, she realized how far things had come. The impact of one choice had spread outward in ways she could never fully measure. After the girl left, Victoria remained seated quietly for several minutes. Then she picked up her phone and called Sebastian. "Hello," he answered. "I love you." Silence followed. "That's wonderful," Sebastian said. "But you usually start conversations differently." Victoria laughed. "Do I need a reason?" "No." His voice softened. "I love you too." Sometimes the most important moments weren't dramatic. They arrived quietly, unexpectedly, like sunlight through a window. Years continued passing. The campus grew into a network. Students became teachers. Programs expanded internationally. Marcus eventually launched his own consulting firm, though he continued appearing at the foundation often enough that everyone assumed he worked there anyway. Elena spent years rebuilding her life and eventually established initiatives focused on helping children escape environments shaped by crime and exploitation. It wasn't redemption in some grand cinematic sense. It was something better. Consistent effort. Real change. The kind that took time. Through it all, Victoria and Sebastian remained together. Not because life became easy. Because they kept choosing the relationship even when it required work. There were difficult periods. Losses. Disappointments. Unexpected obstacles. Yet the foundation of trust they built proved strong enough to endure them. One summer evening many years later, long after headlines had forgotten criminal empires and dramatic rescues, Victoria stood once again beside the lake. The campus stretched farther than ever before. New buildings lined the shoreline. Music drifted from an outdoor performance. Families gathered beneath glowing lights. Children ran through gardens laughing. Sebastian joined her quietly. Older now. Wiser. Still carrying the same eyes she had fallen in love with despite herself. Thinking, he asked. Victoria nodded. Remember the day I signed the divorce papers? Sebastian laughed softly. Unfortunately. I thought I was losing everything. She looked across the water. Turns out I was finding my life. Sebastian wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Together they watched the evening unfold. The lake reflected thousands of lights. The campus buzzed with life. The future stretched ahead, still uncertain, still unwritten. But that was no longer frightening. Because some stories didn't end with a wedding. They didn't end when the villain disappeared. They didn't end when love was finally confessed. Real stories continued. They evolved. They deepened. They became richer through time. And so the story of Victoria and Sebastian continued too, not as a tale about a contract marriage, a divorce, or even a second chance, but as a reminder that people can change, trust can be rebuilt, and sometimes the person you walk away from becomes the person you choose all over again. The end. Years after anyone had stopped calling their lives extraordinary, Victoria discovered that the most unexpected adventures often arrived disguised as ordinary mornings. It began on a Tuesday. She was reviewing proposals in her office while rain drifted gently across the lake outside. The foundation had grown beyond anything she once imagined. What had started as a single campus now operated in multiple countries. Thousands of students had passed through its programs. Entire communities had been transformed. Victoria should have felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. Instead, she felt grateful. The work mattered. Every day she could see evidence of it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sebastian appeared. Meeting cancelled. Lunch. Victoria smiled immediately. Even after all these years, the fact that Sebastian voluntarily cancelled meetings remained mildly shocking. She replied with a simple yes. 20 minutes later, another message arrived. Different sender. Unknown number. The text contained only a photograph. Victoria frowned. The image showed a familiar wooden bench beside the lake. On the bench sat a small metal box. Nothing else. No explanation. No message. Just the photograph. She stared at it for several seconds. Then she laughed softly. It was probably one of the students organizing some elaborate scavenger hunt or surprise event. The foundation had become famous for those. Nevertheless, curiosity got the better of her. She walked outside and followed the lakeside path toward the bench. Rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh. Birds moved through nearby trees. Everything appeared normal. Then she saw the box. Exactly where it had been in the photograph. Victoria approached cautiously. It wasn't large. Roughly the size of a jewelry case. No markings. No locks. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a single folded piece of paper. Victoria unfolded it. Her eyebrows immediately rose. Written across the page were 7 words. You have 12 hours to find him. She stared at the note. Then laughed out loud. Absolutely not. A second sheet rested beneath the first. This one contained instructions. Follow the clues. No shortcuts. No assistance. No Marcus. Especially no Marcus. Victoria laughed even harder. The message continued. If you succeed, you'll understand. If you fail, he'll never let you forget it. Victoria immediately knew who was responsible. Only one person in the world would create an elaborate mystery and simultaneously include a warning about Marcus. She pulled out her phone and called Sebastian. Straight to voicemail. Suspicious. Very suspicious. 5 minutes later she called Marcus. He answered immediately. Before you ask, I am legally prohibited from helping. Victoria blinked. Legally? There were documents. Marcus. Very official documents. She could practically hear him grinning. Good luck. The line disconnected. Victoria stood alone beside the lake holding the note while realization slowly formed. Sebastian had planned something. Something elaborate. Something ridiculous. After all the years she had spent accusing him of being overly serious, he had apparently chosen revenge through creativity. The first clue led her to the oldest building on the original campus. There she found a framed photograph hidden behind a display case. The image showed the first charity event she and Sebastian had attended together during their contract marriage. Attached to the frame was another note. What was the most expensive glass of water in history? Victoria immediately laughed. The auction. She remembered it perfectly. The infamous auction where Sebastian accidentally bid hundreds of thousands of dollars while attempting to ask for water. The answer led her to another location. Then another. Then another. As the day unfolded, Victoria traveled through years of memories. Every clue connected to a moment from their shared history. Some were funny. Some emotional. Some surprisingly painful. Yet each reminder highlighted how much both of them had changed. At one stop she found the exact cafe where they shared their first honest conversation after the divorce. At another she discovered a letter hidden inside a greenhouse similar to the one where Sebastian had once stood watching over her from a distance. Each location contained photographs, messages, and memories carefully preserved. Hours passed. By late afternoon Victoria found herself standing outside the hospital where Sebastian had recovered after taking a bullet meant for her years ago. The next clue waited inside a sealed envelope. Her smile faded slightly as she read it. Some memories aren't happy. They still matter. Victoria remained quiet for a moment. Then she continued. The trail eventually led beyond the city toward the countryside. Clouds drifted across a bright afternoon sky. Fields stretched toward distant hills. The final clue directed her to an old observation point overlooking the valley. When she arrived, she found no note. No box. No puzzle. Just Sebastian standing alone near the edge of the overlook. He turned as she approached. You're late. Victoria stared at him. I spent 6 hours solving your insanity. Technically 8. You timed it. Of course. Victoria laughed despite herself. Then she noticed something unusual. Sebastian looked nervous. Not casually nervous. Truly nervous. After everything they had survived together, that was remarkable. What's wrong? She asked. Sebastian glanced toward the valley. Come here. Curious, Victoria joined him at the overlook. Below them stretched hundreds of acres of rolling countryside. Sunlight illuminated green fields and winding streams. For several seconds she simply admired the view. Then she noticed construction markers. Roads. Foundations. Plans. Lots of plans. Sebastian. He nodded. Keep looking. Victoria's eyes widened as understanding slowly arrived. The scale was enormous. Entire sections had already been mapped. Educational centers. Housing developments. Community spaces. Agricultural programs. Medical facilities. An integrated project unlike anything they had attempted before. This can't be what I think it is. Sebastian smiled. It probably is. Victoria stared at the valley. You bought all this. Eventually. Eventually. The negotiations were complicated. She looked at him. How long have you been planning this? Sebastian hesitated. 3 years. Victoria's jaw dropped. 3 years. I wanted to be sure. Sure of what? Sebastian took a breath. Then another. For a moment he looked like the younger man she had met long ago. The one who struggled to express feelings he didn't fully understand. You once told me something after our divorce. Victoria waited. You said that people deserve opportunities, not just second chances. Her expression softened. She remembered. Sebastian continued. This project isn't about us. He gestured toward the valley. It's about what comes after us. Victoria looked back across the landscape. The realization struck slowly but powerfully. This wasn't another campus. It wasn't another foundation. It was a vision designed to continue helping people long after they were gone. A legacy. Not for their names. For their purpose. You planned all This, she whispered. With a lot of help. Victoria laughed through sudden tears. You impossible man. Sebastian smiled. I've been called worse. They stood together overlooking the future. Wind moved through tall grass. Birds drifted across open skies. The valley below waited patiently for the work ahead. Eventually Victoria spoke. You know what I find funny? What? When we first got married, I thought you'd spend your entire life chasing bigger companies. Sebastian nodded. Reasonable assumption. Victoria leaned against him. Turns out you were chasing meaning. For several moments neither spoke. Then Sebastian glanced down at her. Are you happy? Victoria looked across the valley, then back at him. Years ago she would have needed time to answer. Now she didn't. Yes. The word came easily. Confidently. Completely. Because happiness had never been about perfection. It had never been about avoiding mistakes or pain or loss. It came from building something worthwhile with someone who made the journey meaningful. Together they watched the sun begin its slow descent toward the horizon. Another chapter waited ahead. More challenges. More dreams. More lives to change. And unlike the frightened woman who had once walked out of a lawyer's office believing her story was ending, Victoria now understood something beautiful. Some endings are simply beginnings wearing different clothes. And the best chapters often arrive long after everyone thinks the story is over. The Valley Project became known simply as Horizon. Nobody planned the name. During one of the earliest planning meetings, an architect pointed toward the distant hills and casually referred to the site as the Horizon Project. The name stuck. Within 2 years, construction transformed open land into a thriving community unlike anything Victoria or Sebastian had ever attempted. Schools stood beside